Dr. Norman Richardson was professor of philosophy at Gettysburg College. He looked a little like Andy Rooney with the shocking white hair and the great bushy eyebrows, and he brought much of that same kind of wit and witticism to his classes. I had him for Intro to Philosophy the last semester before he retired. I think he taught the class differently than any other time in his tenure, because we spent very little time talking about classical philosophy and a whole lot about the future. I remember one particular class. He came in and sat down on the desk and just started to talk to us like a kindly old grandfather, bestowing wisdom upon his grandchildren. And the part that I will never forget about that conversation was that he said, you know, for centuries, the philosophical conundrum has been why. But your generation will deal with a very different question. The philosophical question that you will be faced with is, who are you to say? Who are you to say? I must confess, as a 20-something-year-old, I didn't have a clue what he was driving at. And it wasn't a question that burdened my life. But recently, as I look around me, Dr. Richardson was genius and prophet. For who are you to say is the burning question these days. Who are you to say anything negative about the President of these United States? Or who are you to say how we should deal with COVID-19 in our nation, in our state, in our community? Who are you to say that Black lives matter or that all lives matter? Who are you to say anything about our economy, our educational system, our health and welfare? Who are you to say what this community is about? Right now, the county of Clarion is involved in a great brouhaha over who gets to speak for the county. Is it those that advocate masks and social distancing? Or is it those who abhor such things as a burden from on high? Who are you to say? Even in the realm of religion, that question has taken on a decided twist. For we have created theological underpinnings to go with our personal beliefs and desires. And so we have half the church saying that not wearing a mask is a testimony, is a witness to our trust in God. And the other half of the church invoking Jesus' love your neighbor as a reason for wearing masks. Who are you to say? The answer to the question is pretty clear. It's my right to say whatever I want to say, to pronounce judgment on whom I want to pronounce judgment on. It is all about me these days. And therefore, I have the right to speak and to judge. Martin Luther had a word for that. In Latin, it was incurvatus se, curved in on oneself. And it was Luther's definition of sin. St. Paul, in his magnum opus, the letter to the Romans, spends the first 3 chapters talking about sin and judgment, and starts us off with those sins that we all can get on the judgment bandwagon and go, oh yeah, those folks are going to hell. But then he carefully tightens the noose until he ends with this injunction, that those who judge one another are most guilty of all. But Paul doesn't stop there. He says, okay, since we now have determined that we've all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, let's talk about justification by grace. In Christ, God has renewed and made right the relationship between God and ourselves. That's not up for debate anymore. The cross took care of that. Therefore, since that relationship is solid, how do we live with one another? And what plays out in the rest of Romans and in much of the other letters that Paul writes is precisely that. How do we live together in community with one another? And it is there where the genius of Paul shines through in that marvelous image of life together as a body. A body where all parts are integral. Where if one is an eye, they cannot say, I'm out of here, just because they don't like the nose. But all parts are necessary. Even those parts we don't like. Even those parts we disagree with. Even those parts that are different than us. These are the parts that we need to engage fully with if we are to be a healthy body. For it is in the conversations, and I mean serious conversations, not the banter that we get on social media or in the media itself, but significant sit-down conversations over the issues with those who are different than us and carry different views from us. If we don't have those kind of conversations, then we just spin. It is in the midst of those conversations with those we disagree with that we find the energy and the creativity and the innovation and the motivation to begin to find some new answers and to find healing in the body. If all I do is stand around and judge others for being different than I or holding different positions than I, then I am nothing more than a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And I have nothing to say. How will we work this out together? That becomes the million-dollar question. The final answer to the question, who are you to say, is in God's hands. And we may just be surprised at the answer he gives, given the way we're behaving. Just saying. God, when human bonds are broken, and we lack the love or skill to restore the hope of healing, give us grace and make us still. Through that stillness with your Spirit, come into our world of stress, for the sake of Christ forgiving all the failures we confess. You in us are bruised and broken. Hear us as we seek release from the pain of earlier living. Set us free and grant us peace. Send us, God of new beginnings, humbly hopeful into life. Use us as a means of blessing. Make us stronger, give us faith. Give us faith to be more faithful. Give us hope to be more true. Give us love to go on learning. God encourage and renew.